And we're back on Shardlight Radio. I'm your host, Mr. Ben, and this episode's coming at you a little later than it normally does on a Wednesday, but it's been one of those days. On today's show, what I want to do is talk about a deck that I call like an Edson Barboza wheel kick. This deck comes in super hard, chopping away, low to the ground, attempting to drain the opponent of resources with relentless pressure. This deck does feature the Shardbeast, but we get around the Shardbeast with Skytree Command Center and come in over the top, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So to begin, the champion is Ariana and the spirit is Kite, so this is a mono green deck. We have 3 copies of Raging Shardbeast. This card obviously can crush towers, comes out on turn 1, super aggressive, has that drawback, but this deck has ways of getting around that and playing cards that cost 3 or more. Next up, we have the Arbor Carbuncle. Now this unit isn't fantastic. He is good for scouting towers early, and that is something you want to take advantage of in this deck. You want to make sure you don't crash into the wrong tower at the wrong time. Having your opponent take a look at your hand and KO your Sylphia right when you were needing to use it could be a real serious misplay. So the units that have 500 power, normally that's a huge drawback. In this deck, the balance between your hand and the field is so precious that being able to have 6 different units that can scout towers without the risk of breaking them on accident is really valuable. The Arbor Carbuncle also benefits from being bounced back to hand, which is something we want to do to get as many counters as we can on our Skytree Command Center. And once you have all 3 of them, you can get rid of them and draw some cards. Not the most powerful unit on its own, but it fits in this deck very well. Next up, we have 3 copies of the Sky Recruit. The entire purpose of this card is because it can search for another Sky Recruit and keep your hand full. We always want to have a full grip when playing this deck. The 500 power, again, scouting towers is useful because of how reliant we are on not hitting the wrong tower at the wrong time. Final 1 drop in the deck is 2 copies of the Skyship Engineer. This is a 1-cost unit with 1,000 power, so it can break towers, which is nice, but the main reason it's here is because it's free to exhaust the Engineer and return her to hand. Now, the benefit you get from doing that, printed on the card, is not relevant. We don't care about discounting airship units at all, but sometimes we do care about just making sure we get a air unit back into hand to open up the turn, and this card being able to do that for free is really strong. Koala, the Koala. So this is where I want to take a second to talk about our champion. Ariana has 1 power. It lets you search your deck for a copy of Koala, Trusty Companion, and 1 copy of Ariana's Amulet and add them to your opening hand. So you start the game with card advantage. Now the card advantage you get isn't that impressive. Koala the Koala herself is a 1,000 power 2-cost unit that costs 1 less to play if you control an Ariana unit, and it can be destroyed to protect an Ariana unit you have in play. Both of those effects are kind of middling in terms of how valuable they are, but within the tapestry of what the deck is trying to do, which is return a lot of units to hand and just do a lot of things every turn to overwhelm and confound the opponent, the Koala fits in. Not the most powerful card in the deck. Next 2 drop, 3 copies of the 2-cost Sandsea Traveler. This is a 1,500 power unit, and when it attacks, you can switch one of your shards to active. This absolutely comes in relevant. The ability to break towers is there, but also play more things in a turn. We always want to play more things than our opponent. We want to be busy. 2-cost Skytree Hawk. This is a 1,000 power unit, and when it's returned to your hand from the field, you can discard it and draw 2 cards. Sometimes you want to use the Hawk to crack towers. Most of the time you want to use the Hawk to advance your card advantage. You always want to be thinking about card advantage. 2 copies of Ariana, her young prodigy version. When this card arrives, it lets you search out Koala the Koala. That's more important than anything else that's on it. You thin your deck, you get more stuff in your hand. Also, you can pay 1 and return Ariana to your hand. She's also big enough to break, well, until Genesis comes out, she's big enough to break any tower. After Genesis comes out, there will be a tower outside of her reach, but the main utility of this card in the deck is to thin your deck, and it's another way to return stuff to your hand, and it's built into the card. You don't have to use Kite, you don't have to use another effect. She can return on her own. 2 copies of the Great Hawk of the Cloud Sea. So we're into the 3 drops now, and the 3 drops can be dangerous with Raging Shardbeast, but we do have a hedge that lets us get, actually we have a couple of hedges that let us get these larger cost characters into play. I will get to that, but I want to get through the units first. So 2 copies of the Great Hawk of the Cloud Sea. When the card enters play, if there's a destroyed air tower, you can exhaust a unit and return another unit to its owner's hand. This is just basic board control, and that's kind of the way our top end works. They are all expensive. Well, expensive in the context of a Shardbeast deck. Expensive cards that do impactful things when they hit the board. The only 4-drop in the deck is Sylphia. Again, big enough body to crack towers. Also clears problematic units out of the way. And 2 copies of Garga. Same deal. Garga has the added benefit of being able to pick things off in such a way that he gains quickness, and it's totally valid to play Garga and target a cost that will hit your own units to make sure that you have air units returned to your hand. So we have lots of low units coming in on the ground, trying to chop away at the opponent and keep constant pressure while also refilling our hand. These bigger units that come in unexpectedly over the top, avoiding the restriction of the Shardbeast. We're going to get to that. So 3 copies of Tornado Shot in our first spell. This deals 2,000 damage, but it's not active unless you return a unit to hand. Again, we have to be bouncing units every turn. Omega Magic K's. This lets you prevent damage or prevent an attack from a unit, and it can eventually be played for free, which is great. Mainly, this card is here to protect something valuable. If you end up in a turn where you can't get Sylphia back to your hand, this is the kind of card that can keep her in play when you really need it. Or if you've had to return all your units and something's coming out of tower, last ditch maneuver to save that tower and go just one more turn. A single copy of Winds of the Cloudsea. Now this is a card that I could see including more copies of. It does cheat around the Shardbeast because when you put the unit into play, you're not playing it. So if there's multiple cards in play, you can get a Great Hawk down or an Ariana. Sylphia's getting up there. I mean, if you have 4 units in play, paying 4 to return them all to your hand starts to be a little bit awkward. So this is here in case it's needed. But the main way we get around Shardbeast is using Skytree Command Center. So anytime a unit's returned to your hand, you put a counter on the command center, and then you can exhaust it and remove counters to put a unit into play from your hand equal to the number of counters removed. Notably, this does not say during your turn. So you can respond to your opponent's recruit effects by putting cards into play. Even with Shardbeast in play, you can play a Great Hawk or a Garga and do away with whatever they just played. It's extremely frustrating when this goes off. 2 copies of the Sky Dagger. You absolutely want to see one of these. It sucks to have 2 in your hand. You really only need 1, hence 2, not 3. The card is just great used in conjunction with Kite because you can discard a card but not really using the Sky Dagger. The final card in the main deck is Ariana's Amulet. This card I kind of like in general, but in this deck, when you get to add it to your hand for free at the beginning of the game, it's just that much better. It's nice to draw a card when it comes into play. The sacrifice ability is sometimes relevant, but not often. It's really just more card advantage. This card might as well just say, have some card advantage. The shards, 6 Argent Shards, of course, 3 Zephyr Crystals, of course, and 1 Corona. I think Corona the Spirit Ruby has proven to be by far the best legendary shard. It's not even close. The Zephyr Crystal, unfortunately, also highlights a major weakness in this deck. It is so cheap and so easy for Zephyr Crystals to destroy augments that building a deck around relying on an augment doesn't feel great. Feels kind of bad, actually. However, you can't always assume your opponent has everything they need. This deck definitely has the ability to apply enough pressure without cheating these other things out to be able to get our big heavy hitters down on the board. And if somebody's using 2 of their shards to pay to destroy my Skytree Command Center, that means they're underdropping that turn. If you're underdropping into this kind of board pressure, I feel like I'm in a pretty good position. This deck absolutely has the ability to come in and just crush an opponent out of nowhere. It also has the ability to chip away and apply pressure as your opponent slowly runs out of options and you just never do. Until next time, go win some games.